What's up, guys? It's Sam here, and it is 3/24/2019, and I wanted to talk about two things that allow you to have the freedom that you really like. I feel as though many people in life want things, but when you really start asking them why they want those things, right? Like, why do you want that other job? Well, because of the $10,000 extra, or the $40,000 extra, or whatever it is. Well, why do you want that? Because then I can spend time with my family or go on these vacations. And well, why do you want to do that? And it comes down to, if you ask why enough, it seems like that most people just want the freedom of their time to do what they want to do on their own terms and how they want to, like, spend time with friends or spend time traveling or doing what they love in life. And I don't know if this topic is like, so I have a heavy quant finance type background and from an education standpoint. And so many times from a financial standpoint, people get into the weeds about the returns and the tax rates and how to calculate an efficient frontier or what the optimal diversification is in a portfolio with with two assets or four assets or 14 assets or 36. And like, you can do all the fucking math on that, but it misses like the fundamentals. Like, if you don't know how to shoot in basketball or you don't know how to dribble in basketball, like, it doesn't matter if you can do like I don't even know, like, the other things you can do in fucking basketball because I don't pay attention to sports. But it comes down to the fundamentals. And what, like, basically is a savings rate. But I wanted to look at that from two different perspectives. So if this is like slightly interesting or intriguing to you or helpful or insightful, or you just think it's just shitty, let me know down below in the comments, or ask me any questions. I'm happy to help out. Okay, so to give you some type of context, right, because this is going to help set up this first point. There was a Trinity, so I took a couple notes here. There was a Trinity study done, I think it was in late 2000s, or late 90s. And it was out of this university, I think, or maybe three different universities or whatever. And what they did is they wanted to see what the safe withdrawal rate would be on a portfolio that was mixed between stocks and bonds, how much you could pull out of the portfolio. And their gauge of success was if there was money left over at the end of a 30-year period. And the safe withdrawal, like how much you can pull from the portfolio, adjusted for inflation every year. But by the way, if you don't adjust your shit for inflation, like, you'll virtually be able to always pull out 4% because this not getting adjusted for inflation. So if you could do that for the first 5 to 10 years and not really adjust for inflation and just adjust your lifestyle accordingly, you should probably be good to go. And anyway, 4% rule. Okay. So if you take the inverse of 4%, what that's saying is that if you have, which is 25, right? So whatever your annual spending is times 25, and that'll equal the portfolio you need in retirement to be able to live off of. Why does that make sense? Because if you say live off of $40,000 a year, right? That's their spending. That's why I said spending, not income. You're spending. If you spend $40,000 a year, then that means you need a portfolio of $1 million to retire on. Now, if you went through and say if you were to, let's take a look here. If you were to live on $30,000, because when you actually look at it, and if you're honest with yourself, you can make some adjustments and you could live off of $30,000. But anyway, this is what I chose in this example because I know for me personally, I can live on significantly less than $30,000 a year while still traveling multiple months of the year and putting money away. Like, I could easily spend less than $30,000 a year, like, no problem at all. So the total amount of retirement savings in a portfolio that I would need at that level, right? Or you would if you can live off of $30,000, is $750,000. Now, if you went through, there's two ways you could take a look at that, and that's what we're about to get into right now. If, say hypothetically, you go out to eat, right? Every week, maybe 3 times, right? You go out to eat and you grab, maybe a drink or something like that in the morning for like $3, and then you go out to lunch at work with some of the buddies, and you spend $8 on like a sandwich or fucking Chipotle or something like that, and that's $8, and you spend on average $11, but you do it 3 times a week, right? Because we know we probably don't do it every week. Well, I don't do it every week. I barely ever do it, honestly. But a decent number of people do, right? So you do that 3 times a week with an average of $11 per day. So what that comes to on an annual basis is $1,716. So when you actually do the math on that, that reduces the amount you need, in retirement to $707,000. So you dropped it by $43,000 that you'll need in retirement. And you'd be like, Sam, well, I actually enjoy that. Oh, cool. Well, then go ahead and you enjoy that. Like, you do you. You got to make yourself happy and fulfilled. But think about some of the things you spend your money on that don't bring you happiness and fulfillment in life. Like, for me, like, I don't have any desire to get a car with a car payment. It just doesn't make any sense to me to have any, like, I don't care about that kind of thing, right? So that doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm sure if you actually were thoughtful and purposeful and intentional about how you went through and spent your money, you could probably easily come up with that amount. And if you say went through and you were maybe more intentional, and you, instead of living in that 3,200 square foot house, you downgraded to a 2,000 square foot house, and you were able to save, we'll just be conservative here, and we'll say $4,000 a year, right? Like, super conservative. What is that, like $400 and change per month or something? Or $380 something and change per month? So $4,000 a year. The amount that you need less in retirement is $100,000. Think about how long it would take you to save $100,000. So by literally just cutting $4,000 off of your annual spending, you can save $100,000 in your retirement portfolio needed to live off of for the rest of your life, essentially. So instead of $750,000, you would only need $649,000 to live off of. And maybe your annual spending between you and your wife or whatever is $60,000. So there's a lot of fat in there that you can trim. So imagine being able to cut $12,000 out a year, right? Maybe you have a car payment. Maybe she has a car payment. Maybe you live in a 4,000 square foot house, and you can cut out $16,000 a year, right? So when you actually go through and do the math on that, like, let's take a look here. When you go through and actually do the math on that, that's over $400,000 you need less in retirement. Just from that, right? If you're at $60,000, which is the average household income in the United States, $59,000 and change as of a few years ago. So if you were able to cut back on a few of these things, and it's really not that possible. Like, it's really possible. I spend less than $2,000. I mean, like, I don't need a lot. Like, I don't have kids. My girlfriend's in a different state. I don't need a lot. So I'm in a different spot than a lot of people, but I need less than $2,000 a month easily. So I'm getting to, and I still travel multiple times a year. Like, I was just in Costa Rica a month ago, and I was in New York before that, and in December I went somewhere else. Like, Last year, I think I was in 3 international trips. Like, I still travel a significant amount because to me, that's enjoyable. Buying a car is not fucking enjoyable to me. I'd rather travel and create these experiences. So just kind of think about the intentionality behind some of the ways you spend your money and then the actual effect it has on the amount of money you need in retirement, right? To go from $750,000 to $650,000 just by cutting $4,000, right? If you took, let's take, if you were saving, say, on average, we'll say 10 grand a year, that's still going to take you 10 fucking years to save that extra $100,000. Right? If you're saving 20 grand, it's going to take you 5 years. It's still going to take you 5 additional years just to save that extra $100,000. You know what I mean? I don't know, but to me, that time is way more important. Way more important. I would much rather, you know what I mean, have that time back than something else. Or if you save it like $5,000, it's going to take you 20 fucking years. You just fucking forget for retirement. Hopefully you love what you're doing because you're fucked. So I wanted to highlight this example from that way, that perspective, and then put it on its head and look at it from the compounding effect of this, right? So we just looked at how much cutting $4,000 from your annual budget, right? And so like maybe it's just one or two or the three of these things, right? So you could maybe say, okay, well, I really love going out to eat with my buddies during lunch. I like the camaraderie, or I like spending time, blah, blah, blah. Cool. Good for you. Kudos. Like, maybe you don't enjoy your car. Maybe you have all this wasted space in your house. Maybe you have Hulu and Netflix and cable and all this other fucking garbage that adds up. Like, just be intentional about how the way you spend your money. And if you cut 7 of those things on a monthly basis, or just change the way that you spend money to be more intentional and purposeful about how you spend your money, it makes a huge difference. And you get to that $4,000 of annual savings. Now think about this for a second, right? So you're spending less, right? So that effect is $100,000, right? From that $4,000 of annual savings. Now, when you go through and say, hey, I'm spending $4,000 less, right? You're at 60 and now you're at 56. Excuse me, that $4,000, you decide to invest in index funds representing the entire market, whether that's here in the United States or whatever country you're watching this in, and they're virtually no cost or free. If you check out like Fidelity or some of Vanguard's, I think they have a couple funds that are index funds that represent a large part of the market that are absolutely free. There's a 0 expense ratio. So now you take that, right, and you invest it. $4,000 a year. And maybe you're in a bad spot right now. Maybe you've got 20 grand or 60 grand or 100 grand saved. Or maybe you're negative, right? Maybe you're negative net worth, right? With your house and all your consumer debt and then your student loans and your cars and all that. And like you have a negative net worth. So you take that money and you invest it, right? So I ran 2 scenarios. Retirements in 20 years and retirements in 30 years. And I ran it at 7% and 9%. So if you take that $4,000 and you invest that, right, because now you've cut your lifestyle back by like changing, maybe you go out to eat twice per week instead of 3 times per week, and maybe you get rid of your car payment or go to a different type of car or one that's just older, you know what I mean? And maybe you, instead of having, Hulu and Apple Music and Netflix and cable and Amazon and some other fucking subscription service, maybe you cut it down to only having 2 or 3, like the most important ones to you. And then maybe instead of having 400 megabyte download and 300 upload for your internet, maybe you decide to downgrade just a little bit. So instead of $199 a month, it's $119 a month, right? And the aggregate of all these saves you that $4,000 a year, and you invest that every single year for the next 20 years. It's crazy. at a 7% return, at the end of year 20, you're going to have $175,000 at an average return of 7%. And if you did that for 30 years, right? If you have a little bit, maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe you're in your 20s, maybe you're in your 30s and you're planning on working until you're 70. Or you're in a really bad spot and you just don't have anything saved up. You did that for 30 years. At a 7% return, you have over 400 grand. And that's just $4,000 a year. So you're like, shit, to live off of $30,000 a year, I need $750,000. And then you're like, okay, I can cut $100,000 off of that, but I still need $650,000 to live off of 30 grand in retirement? Fuck, what kind of lifestyle is that? And then you just don't get started because $650,000 still seems like it's so far away. But if you just do the math and you look at it, right? And you put that $4,000 away and you put it away at a, actually this might be kind of interesting. And so you put it away and you invest that, and your time horizon is 30 years. And remember, it's only $4,000 a year. And you get a 9.5% return in the market over that period of time. The portfolio you're going to have at the end of 30 years, $650,000 at a 9.5% return. And that doesn't include if you were to say double that, right? If you were to say save $8,000, right? And so if you were to save $8,000 annually and you got a 7% return, right? Because you're like, Sammy, I can't get 9.5%. Well, you definitely can't get 9.5% with that attitude. My money invested, I've actually quadrupled in the last 2 years. And it's going to continue, I would expect, at least having double-digit returns. The next real estate investment I'm about to get should easily quadruple my money within the first 3 years. But anyway, so say you were to double that to $8,000, right? So instead of spending $60,000, you cut it back to $52,000. Maybe you get rid of your car and you change out your wife's car to just an older car or something. And then you cut back on one or two other things throughout the year, and it really starts to add up, right? So, and you get a 7% return over the next 30 years, your portfolio is $815,000. You got your money for retirement just by putting $8,000 away a year. Like, it doesn't take that much to do this. And remember, if you were to save $8,000 annually and you could live on $30,000, then that means that you only need $550,000 in retirement. Right? So if you're at 815, then you can actually live a different type of lifestyle, right? Because you can safely withdraw about 4%. So you could probably pull out around $33,000, which is like a $3,000 raise from the 30. Not that that's tremendous, but it's a 10% increase. Or maybe you just retire 5 years earlier. I don't know. You got to understand what's important to you. So you've got the benefit in terms of the lesser amount that you need in retirement, plus if you take that and then you invest it, you have the compounding growth of that savings over time. And that's why increasing the savings rate is crazy, the effect it has. It's just absolutely stupid, the amount of effect it has. And this is the last point on here. If you saved $8,000 annually, right? Whether that's you downgrade to from a house that's, you know what I mean, a payment of $3,500 a month down to something where it's $2,500 a month, or whatever the case is, like you save $8,000 a year through cutting back on your spending, and you invest that and you earn 9.5%. That's $1.3 million over 30 years. That's crazy. That's amazing. Just by cutting back that $8,000 and putting it into investments. And whether you think you can get 8.5% or 9.5% or not. Like even if you get 7%, remember it's $815,000. Look where you're at right now. Look in the fucking mirror and take responsibility for your actions. Nobody else is going to do it. Anyways, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. And don't forget to subscribe if you're on YouTube. Peace out.